Hello and welcome to the Baseball Wisconsin podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gotzler. All right, so it's been a few months since I put an episode, and I did record this one last winter, but just saving it for the right time. And today's guest, and we're talking about Game 7, 9th inning, extra innings here with Tony Gerharz. Tony is our WBCA All-Star Classic chairman, and this episode's being released on Friday, June 27th, 2025. Which is when the first game is played up at E.J. Schneider on the campus of Oshkosh North High School. So Tony, in this episode, talks about his journey coaching at Oshkosh West for 40 plus years, head coach for most of those years, baseball in the Oshkosh area, history of his teaching career, his coaching career, and a lot of talk about the All-Star Classic and how he's still staying involved now that he's a retired coach. And if you're driving up to the Classic today or tomorrow, it's an incredible event. 4 teams, North, East, South, West, 72 seniors represented. Last time they get to wear their high school jerseys in an incredible facility. And if you get an opportunity to go up there and watch, just some of the best baseball you're going to find. So before turn it over to Tony, just want to say thank you for all you listeners for taking the time. I know it's been a gap since episodes here, but this is a good way to put a bow on the 2025 season. So without further ado, chairman of the All-Star Classic and retired baseball coach at Oshkosh West, Tony Gerharz.
I'm a retired head baseball coach from Oshkosh West High School. I was there 43 years in the program, 37 as a head coach. I just retired last fall. I was a teacher there for 35 years, teaching freshman health. And I retired from teaching 3 years ago. So that's where I'm at. I'm part of the WBCA, been involved for many years. Currently, I'm still the All-Star chair. I was a district rep and a conference rep, but that goes to active coaches. So that is not me anymore. So there's my little intro.
Well, I appreciate it. All right, we got to go all the way back. Where did you grow up? How did you start playing? Where did that love for the game begin?
Sure. I grew up in Neenah, Wisconsin, about 15 minutes north of Oshkosh, and started playing Little League baseball when I was 9. I got the background. I started as a bat boy when I was 8. I played in the suburban athletics is what it's called. It's kind of outside the city of Neenah. I played then Little League from 9 to 12. And then I played in their opponent, or actually it's called Senior Babe Ruth at the time, from 13 to 18, basically. So that's where I got involved. And a little later, we'll probably talk about how I got involved in coaching, but it was kind of through my Little League, one of my Little League coaches that got me involved in coaching. So I went to elementary and middle school in Neenah at a Catholic school called St. Gabriel's. And then from there, I went to St. Mary Catholic High School, which at the time was located in downtown Menasha, which was anywhere between a 20 and 30-minute drive every day to get there. Now, ironically, now that they built a new high school 10, 15 years ago, that's about 5 minutes from where I grew up. But at the time, a long time ago, 40-some years ago, I went to Menasha St. Mary's, played baseball and football there for 4 years, basketball for 2 years. And then from there, I went on to UW Oshkosh, played football for 3 years. I tried out for baseball and for Coach Russ Tiedemann. I was a pretty good high school player, second baseman, but there they had an All-American by the name of Fred Eddy that was pretty good. And so Coach Tiedemann kept me around for about 2 weeks, and then they didn't have room for me, and I understood exactly why, because I just wasn't as good as what they had. Because at the time in the late 70s, they had in the 80s and 90s even, they had a really, really good, strong program at UWO. So that's kind of a little bit of my background, and got involved with baseball and other sports.
Well, it sounds like a all-American childhood, right? Growing up, school, sports, and eventually you decided to get into teaching. So when did you know you wanted to get an education, and that probably sparked some coaching interest? Talk us through that journey.
Sure. And another thing that kind of helped, I was an only child. So my mom and dad my dad played some high school sports back in the late 40s. My mom never did. She grew up on a farm. But they got me involved in baseball and every sport there was, basically. So at that time, back in the early 70s, that's what we had. We had sports. They didn't have all this other stuff that's going on now. So kind of like I mentioned earlier, I went to UW Oshkosh, and I kind of went there, and I've told my students this for 30 some years, that I went there either to be a cop or to be a teacher. Um, and because I'm kind of one of those guys that like follow the rules and that type of thing. So, and at the time in the late 70s, Oshkosh had a really good, well, they still do, criminal justice program and a good education department. So, like I said, I played football for 3 years. The Titans, I tell people the Titans at UW always, I got the Saturdays off. I was, what my friends called me, the scout team All-American. I was a short, slow wide receiver that didn't play much on Saturdays, but got crap beat out of me on Tuesday through Friday. But I enjoyed it. I still got lifelong friends that I keep in contact with, that I played football with. But from that experience, I played football for 3 years, and then my senior year, I knew I wasn't going to play much, and I was going to start student teaching, and I was in physical education and health at UWO. And my one of my teammates, a guy by the name of Bob Taylor, had just been student teaching the semester earlier at Oshkosh West, and I seen him somewhere, and he said, "Hey, a student taught Oshkosh West. He also helped coach freshman baseball. His it would have been his senior year of college." And I thought, okay, maybe I want to do that. So I just went over to Oshkosh West one day during fall football and introduced myself to the head coach and freshman coach, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be student teaching in a year, and did you guys have any openings? I played football and baseball and basketball." And they said, and at the time they said, "Sure, we take any volunteers." So I was with a guy by the name of Jim Wallerman, who was a freshman football coach, and then ended up being a JV baseball coach for many years too. And I coached football there, and then the JV football coach was also the head baseball coach. So they like kind of I was always there every day. I don't think I ever missed a day or anything like that. I never went into the coach's office for like the first, I didn't even know there was a coach's office at Oshkosh West. But I parked in the parking lot, went out to practice, enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the JV football coach at the time, Chuck Grable, was the head baseball coach, and he was more into football. And he'll be the first to admit that. And he said, "Hey, you want to help out with baseball?" I said, "Sure." It's kind of what, primarily my background. So I helped with him on the varsity one year. Then I helped the JV one year. And then a freshman job opened up at Oshkosh West. And they said, "Hey, you want to do a paid job?" The other ones are all volunteers. I said, "Sure." It's just getting done with college, got done with student teaching. And then I got into coaching there. And then from there, I did my student teaching at Oshkosh West and Fayed. And then the next 3 years, 4 years, I was a substitute teacher. And about the last year or two, I was what now they call them building subs, but I kind of was primarily at Oshkosh West, and they liked my coaching. I also did scouting for the head basketball coach, and during the winter, so you know they loved all that, especially in a volunteer position. So then I subbed for 4 years, and then summer of 1987. I interviewed. They were opening up a health education job at both Oshkosh North and Oshkosh West. They never had health before, but the state was starting to mandate it, and so it's perfect. I interviewed for that, got that job. At the same time, Chuck, who was the head baseball coach, didn't really want to do that anymore. And football was becoming. He was also the head football coach, so that was becoming bigger and bigger of a thing. So I interviewed then for the baseball head job my first year teaching, and I got that, and then been there ever since. So paid a lot of dues, and I always, any volunteer coaches that I've gotten in the last 40 some years of coaching, I always tell them, hey, that's how a lot of us, at least in my high school, at West High School, we got started by being a volunteer, usually while in college, but sometimes even after college, or maybe a first, second, third year teacher. And there were no paid jobs, and you can usually tell who are the ones that are going to hang around, because they'll do the volunteer job, and if the first thing they ask is how much I get paid, then probably not somebody that's going to hang around. So, but I've taken on anybody I wanted to. I've taken on many volunteer every year. I've probably got 2 or 3 new volunteers that coach with us, and I got several that hung around with us for volunteer position where they get a little stipend, of money, but not a whole lot. So that's kind of a little bit of my background there.
Well, I just love how that started. I think that story is so common, and I hope it becomes full circle here at some point, because you think about those young 20-year-old guys who love to compete. They're done playing. They just want to think of how many times you brought a video camera to go scout a basketball game or a football game, and you're driving all over the valley or all over the state of Wisconsin at God knows what time of night. But you just did it. You loved it, before you had anything really tying you down. You just want to be involved with these programs. You volunteer, you cut your teeth, you paid your dues. And I just love that story. And I think the game rewards people like that. It really does. So I love hearing, it's summer of 87, get a health job, get that head baseball job. Obviously going to be, spring of 88 is your first season. So maybe go back to that first season. Like, what type of coach were you? How did you evolve over time? A lot of changes obviously happened in your personal life as you were the head coach, but like, go back to those early days. What did it look like?
Sure. And I forgot to mention earlier, the week that I got the teaching job, and then a little bit later, a couple weeks later, got the baseball job, was when I met my wonderful wife of 30. Oh, she's downstairs. 34 years. 80, yeah, it'll be 35 this summer. I met her actually that week at the head basketball coach's house at a summer get together. I was playing fast pitch softball with them at the time. And that's how I met my wife. And so we dated for first couple of years, and she came out to all of my games and all that type of stuff, which is, and that's something I might get to later, but we all know that, having a supportive spouse is very important, especially to try to have some longevity in coaching. And the kids, and I have 3 adult daughters now, but they were all very supportive. So that all led to me be able to do what I did. Because I was gone quite a bit, and my wife was wonderful, during all that time. So yeah, I'm a 1988 team. I'm not going to do it on here, but I can recite the starting lineup, and I still keep in contact with several of those guys. They'll contact me maybe 2-3 times a year. Hey, coach, we're going to be over here. We're going to be over there. Come on over. Da da da. One of my players that had a hard time in high school, and then his dad died during senior year, and he had a whole bunch of stuff going on, and he still contacts me and invites me to his wedding, and that's kind of neat. I see several of them still around town, and they last couple of years they tried to get together 4 or 5 of them to come out to a game, because they knew I was getting close to retirement type thing. So that's always kind of neat. And we had a real successful team that year. And the head coach left me a really good team, which always helps. And I still remember I just reminisced about this 2 weekends ago at the state baseball clinic that I was a young little young coach coming out of college and so on, and just started my head coaching job. And in the sectional, we were at Goodland Field, and we were playing our first game against Seymour. And do you remember, Tim, who the coach at that time at Seymour was? Bald guy, that's our treasurer.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was Willie. Tom Wilson.
Okay.
Tom Wilson coached, and I usually room with Willie at different All-Star game events and different WBCA type things. So yeah, he was the coach there, and then we beat them in the first game. He had a really stud pitcher, but after that he said he didn't have much else. So we beat them, and then we get in a championship game, and we get crushed by a Appleton West team, which was coached by Bruce Erickson, who's one of my mentors, and I met Bruce back in college, actually. And they had Appleton West was just, they're in the late 80s and 90s, and they were a dominant team and not only the FVA but in the state too. So, but yeah, the 88 team was a special team. And success also, we're pretty good. Success also helped, but it's cool to, the relationships with coaching, to be able to still see those guys, and they stay in contact with me after they heard about me retiring back in last November from coaching. I got several emails and text messages and that type of thing. So that's always pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, throughout the years, you've done so much in the game, not only in your community, but throughout the state of Wisconsin. It's taken you some incredible places and met some incredible people. When you think about like your personal life, you mentioned, you got married, had 3 children, you married a teacher, you live that teacher coach life where there's moments where it's a sprint, then there's some downtime, and then there's, always something to do. But, talk about how did you balance all of that? I think that's something coaches are struggling with, right? Coaches that are having more on their plate and trying to manage it all, and they have a young family at home and a spouse. Like, how, give us some advice from that perspective.
Sure. And, this was the time when there wasn't all the technology and the social media and all that type of stuff. So nowadays it's got to be tough for these people. But I mean, there's people. For all those years also, I coached a semi-pro baseball team, an adult team called the Oshkosh Giants, I took over actually for Tom Lecter. Tom did it for a couple years in the mid 80s, and then I took over my first year at Oshkosh West was my last year coaching the Giants because that just got to be too much in summer. But trying to recruit players, and we had a really good relationship with UW Oshkosh for many years. But I'm doing that, and basically I had a week off between the end of the summer season, and the Giants we typically always went to state summer tournaments, adult tournaments, and then we go on to a couple years. I know we went on to the regional in Eau Claire, and usually about when the Giants just got done with baseball, that's about the second week in August, and football starts up. So I would maybe be lucky to have 4 or 5 days off at the end of July, early August, to not to have any sports going on. But they kept us going. My kids were born in 92, 94, 97. And at that time, I wasn't coaching the summer team anymore, but I was the president and general manager of the summer team. So, which means I'm the head ball shaker. A lot of times I'm taking care of the scorebook, doing the stats, getting the stuff to the newspaper. And a lot of coaches, go through that, and that's just part of what we do. And I was fortunate when my kids were little. My dad was deceased back in the late 80s. So my mom lived real close to Oshkosh, and she actually ended up moving in with us. So when my kids were little, I was very fortunate that she was there to help with my wife, with the kids, and when Dad was gone a lot and that type of thing. So it's tough. I have supportive family is really important.
Are there things you did strategically to try to ingrain your family into your program? I mean, you just sounds like you were always doing something to serve baseball in your community. Like, how did you strategically get your own family involved to make sure it wasn't something that always was pulling Dad away? I think that's something coaches always talk about, is like they don't want the game to be the reason why Dad's gone, and that becomes a point of contention. So did you do anything to bring them part of the program, make the girls feel part of the program?
Oh, sure. We still got pictures, the old Polaroid pictures of my kids were little, riding the infield tractor, and coming over and help Dad with the field. And like I said, my wife, I think our first technical date was at the Oshkosh Giants game. After I met her, I said, "Well, yeah, I coach this team of college guys, and come on over." So she came over to AJ Schneider Field, and my mom would always be there watching the games too. So I'm coaching third base, and then in between trying to introduce my mom to my wife Gail, and they struck it off really good, which is really good. My kids, they'd come out to games. And my mom or my wife would bring them out when they were little, and they'd have some pictures in a stroller and that type of thing. And they played sports in middle school, and they grew up playing. I think one or two of my daughters played summer baseball, little league baseball, basically in Oshkosh. And one year, my middle daughter was on the boys' team with one of her friends, and the rest were boys. And that was neat because I could try to get to their games. And then she ended up being a pretty good softball player in high school. But yeah, and that's just kind of coaching. That's just what we did. Our summer vacations in the Gerharz family was usually about 3 days in Chicago. We'd try to find a Cubs home game, and because we were big Cubs fans at the time, and now I'm more Brewers since the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. But that was our trip. We'd go one day, and we'd get a hotel room and stay in downtown Chicago. Take the train sometimes, usually the train, and they'd love that, out to the L train out to Wrigley. One day was a Cubs game, and the next day was shopping on Michigan Avenue, which I sat outside the stores and waited for him, but I hope they didn't spend too much money. But that's kind of what we did. We were sports fans. I'm a Packers season ticket holder, so my parents were actual original ticket holders at Lambeau Field. So the same 2 seats that my mom and dad had is what I have now, and and every fall, when the kids were big enough to go to a Packer game, they each got to pick a game to go with Dad. And if Dad had a baseball obligation on a fall weekend, like a WBCA meeting, well, then Mom usually would, take one of them type thing. So it's just that, sports was on TV all the time. And that, I was fortunate again, like that my wife was, all supportive. And I know that's a key thing. And the kids, enjoyed it. They all, like I said, played sports, in high school. They didn't play after high school, but that's important.
Well, appreciate you doing that. But you talked about the WBCA, and how did you get involved? Like, what are the early days? How has your involvement grown? You've won what seems like every award under the sun, and rightfully so. But like, talk about the early days and how's that evolved over time?
Sure. Actually, I was at the WBCA clinic a couple weeks ago on a Friday night, the social night, actually, I think it was. Yeah, the social at the clinic. And I sat down with Tommy O'Connell. Long time, God, Tommy was one of the original, guys with Mark Fuller getting the WBCA going and the clinic and all that type of stuff. And I've known Tom probably, oh my God, I think I met Tommy probably in the late 80s. I was a young whippersnapper, and he was a very veteran, well-known coach. I think at the time, I think Tom was at Milwaukee Pulaski, and he was at all the clinics, and he ran, I think, the clinics before Mark, and Mark does an awesome job. But I sat down with Tom at the social, and I said, "Hey, Tommy, what was the year that Ted Williams talked?" I remember it was at the Mark Plaza, which is now the Hilton in downtown Milwaukee, and I was, I think, a college senior at the time, and one of my roommates lived in Mequon, so I remember going down, and I didn't know anything about staying in a hotel and all that type of stuff. And my head coach just gave me the flyer from the WBCA because he never went to baseball clinics. He was more into the football stuff. And so I went down and said, Ted Williams, and Tom goes, I think it was 1981. And I tried to look at my note. I have some notes. I keep all that kind of stuff in the basement. And I think it was 1981 or 82 that Ted Williams, I still remember Ted Williams. He was in the upper room at the Mark Plaza, which is now the Hilton. And they had the beams in the room that he spoke, but it was like just, seeing Ted Williams speak was amazing. So I don't think I've missed a clinic since then. All the state clinics. I remember 1982. I'm looking at the Hall of Fame banquet, little booklet that we get that Ron Kading puts together every year. And I remember 82. I sat at a table with Ron Waholski, who was going to the Hall of Fame from Ripon High School. And only reason I knew Ron is because at that time back in those years teaching, you had to go to different seminars and that type of stuff. And I met him there. I went back to the clinic again in 1983, and Russ Tiedemann was the baseball coach at Oshkosh and taught outstanding class called Coaching Baseball. And like I said, I played like about a week and a half for the Titans, but he knew who I was, and I was in class and that type of thing with him. And he invited me to sit down at his table for a Hall of Fame, and I just thought that was like the coolest thing in the whole world. Geez, I'm sitting down at a table with a Hall of Famer that's going up to give a speech. So that was really neat. So I kept going to the clinics every year. I said for a couple of them, I always stayed with my buddy, one of my college roommates that lived in Mequon. And then probably in late 80s, I was a freshman coach, but I had met Tom Nygaard. Somehow, Tommy was coaching at Upton Xavier. But I think I met him through summer baseball or something or other. So maybe a couple of his kids were playing for my summer team. I'm not sure. And he was big in the WBCA. And so he kind of talked to me a little bit about that. Like I mentioned earlier, I met Bruce Erickson in college. Bruce and his wife actually ran a bar at UWO, right outside UWO, that a lot of college students went to. And one of my other college roommates was a bartender there. And I didn't know at the time, this was probably 1980. I knew the name Bruce Erickson just because he was such a stud player from Appleton, and he grew up in Oshkosh and that type of thing. But just being at the bar and stuff, talking baseball was really neat. And then he took over Appleton West and everything that they've done there. Probably in the late 80s. Actually, I think I looked it up. I think it was 1990. I'm doing the Oshkosh Giants. I'm not coaching them anymore, but I'm the GM, like I said, which means recruiter, ball shaker, all that type of stuff, paying the umpires. And this guy that looks like the Notre Dame football coach comes up and talks to me at a Giants game. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. All of a sudden I look and I say, I recognize you from clinics. Well, it's Marty Paulson Fond, like his son Chip. Who I think graduated in 1989 from high school and went on to play college at Northern Illinois. Chip was playing for our summer team. So I got to know Marty pretty good because him and his wife Cindy were at a lot of the games. And this was before Fond du Lac was even in our conference. They didn't come into our conference, I think, until 91, 92, somewhere in there. So Marty got me then involved, and say, oh, yeah, these clinics and stuff. So I remember there's one in Green Bay, I think it was, at the whatever that center is over by the river. I don't know where it was, but Tom Nygaard would say, hey, come on by our, hey, you can sleep in our room. So like I'm still a young whippersnapper in early 30s, and all of a sudden I got a pull-out couch in the Tom Nygaard and Marty Paulson room at the clinic, and that was neat. And then Tom asked me then if I wanted to coach in the All-Star game, And I had been coaching. It had been my 5th year, I think, at West. And I said, well, sure. At that time, the games were played at Goodland Field up in Appleton, where the Appleton Foxes played. I said, sure. And that got me involved. And like I said, I had met Tom Wilson when we played him. I didn't know Tom Wilson from anybody until we played Seymour in 1988. But then I also did some summer camps. This is how baseball, everything kind of comes and goes, and meeting different people and seeing different people. I did a couple years. I did UWO. Coach Fleckner asked me to come help because they were getting big numbers, and this was probably late 80s, early 90s, and big numbers at UWO baseball camps. So of course, bigger numbers means you need more coaches. So, and George Roman. I mean, that's when I met George Roman from Point, and he's just, he was just one of the funniest guys you ever want to meet. Very serious on the field, but one of the funniest guys. So that's where I got to know Tom Wilson a little better, and George Roman, and several other guys I know that were coaching there at the time. And that's when Tom got me involved a little more as I think at the time as a conference rep with the FVA, because I think whoever we had before had retired. So I said, sure. And so that got me involved more in the WBCA as a conference rep. And then, I went to and then after I coached the All-Star game, I went to the next couple All-Star games up at Goodland Field just to watch. And then I think it was 95, 96 is when the Fox City Stadium was being built. So they knocked down Goodland Field. So where we used to have the All-Star game up in Appleton for many years, they knocked down Goodland Field and built the Fox City Stadium. So that year that there was no place to play, is they contacted me and said, hey, E.J. Schneider Field in Oshkosh, at Oshkosh North High School, is a really nice facility. It's fenced in and all that kind of stuff, and nice facility, and still central Wisconsin, kind of, 20 minutes from Appleton. So I was on the Snitz Club at the time, since being the head baseball coach. And Snitz Club is a group of guys that run the concession stand and do a bunch of stuff on the field and everything in Oshkosh. And I asked them, hey, so you guys want to take a chance at doing this All-Star game? And they said, sure. And I think that was 95 or 96. And we've been doing it. And that got me much more, involved in WBCA, obviously. And then Tom Nygaard, who was the All-Star chairman, was done with coaching back in, I think it was early 2000, maybe 2002, 2003. And Tommy went into administration. I think he was at Fond du Lac. There's a couple of different schools. And since he wasn't coaching anymore, and he was getting administration, they needed somebody to take over the All-Star game. And I had been dragging the field and doing all that kind of stuff. And I said, and they wanted to try to keep it at EJ because it's a nice location, good facility, and so on. So then that's when they said, hey, would you like to take over as chairman of the All-Star game? I said, sure. But I mean, Tom Nygaard had it so well organized and so on. I just kind of followed. I did some changes and such, but kind of followed his group. And that's one of the big things with the WBCA is that we have a consistent group of guys. Yeah, we're all getting older. We have several now retired coaches that are still doing board jobs. You cannot be an elected, like a president, vice president, second vice president. Those you have to be active head coaches. But like we got guys like Ron Kading, who does the awards, Marty Paulson, who's our secretary, Tom Wilson, who our treasurer, Mark Fuller, does everything. Runs the Hall of Fame, runs the clinic type thing. Joe Waite now is retired, who does our yearbook and does All-Star book and a website, and it's just so consistent and that's why everything seems to run. Excuse me. Everything seems to run so smoothly, not only during the state clinic but during the All-Star game, and that's a key thing. I hope so. That got me all involved in WBCA, and I just enjoy being around those guys. And I've been to several national conventions. Which are always really neat, to do. So, and I got involved in ABCA, which is a national, excuse me, the national group. I probably started going to national clinics maybe early 2000s. We didn't go to all of them, but that got to know the group of guys and that type of thing. So that's always neat. It's WBCA. We typically have, we see each other at the All-Star game in summer for 3 days, golf outing on a Thursday, games on Friday, games on Saturday. Then we see each other again for 2 or 3 days in fall. Usually it's October, early November, where we have our executive board meeting, typically down in Madison, and we try to hook it up with a Badger football game. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And we get to go down on Friday and see all the guys Friday, Saturday, and then we have a meeting Sunday morning, that type of thing. And then now obviously the state clinic, we get to see everybody, and then still running into people, at Brewer games or whatever. It's always kind of neat. So that's kind of cool to do. But like I said, great organization. People just probably don't realize how much WBCA does and how organized. I mean, that yearbook that Joe Waite puts together is got to be the best in the nation. And now he's over 300 some pages and pictures and colored and all that type of thing. He has some good help from a couple good people, but that and our clinic is over 500. Our membership is like almost 700, but our clinic was like over 500 coaches on a crappy Friday weather day. And that that's pretty neat. We wish we would have more would come to me, but we love to see them all down there. If it'd be great to have more come to the speakers, and especially the Saturday Hall of Fame luncheon. But this year it was crappy weather, and one of the things we ran into, the Badger basketball played at noon, so we had a great turnout of Hall of Famers at the luncheon, but not a lot of coaches. Typically older coaches, younger guys, probably want to get home, get back, or go watch Badger games somewhere. So, but again, like I said, when it talked to other groups in other states about their coaching association, I think we got probably one of them, if not the best, one of the best in the nation.
Yeah, appreciate that. Just want to dig back into your coaching career a little bit before we go back to the association. If it's early 80s, listen to Ted Williams. If it's Russ Tiedemann, I mean, the amount of people I've talked to that went through that Russ Tiedemann baseball class at Oshkosh that are now coaching or were coaching for a long time just blows my mind. There's like a couple people in the state. It's like there's guys that were at Oshkosh at a certain time that all seem to be involved in the game. That's just amazing. But if it's those guys or coaches you've been around for all these years, you've been around some of the best coaches. What were you picking up from them? Obviously, as you run your own program for such a long time at such a high level, Hall of Fame career, but you were probably always picking something up. So as you look back, like what were some of the things you learned along the way that you picked up from other coaches?
Oh, sure. I mean, God, I like I said, I keep a lot of my stuff. I have a file cabinet kind of thing, or down in my basement with notes that's still from my first clinics. I was one of those guys that always took a lot of notes. I haven't lately, just because I've been running around doing other stuff at the clinics. But the notes you get and the different experiences. One of the best things, learning as a coach is not just all the X's and O's, which are great. And baseball people are great about sharing stuff. I mean, like I said, I coached football for 35 years and they're pretty good too. And the football coaches do a really good clinic. Usually I think it's in the end of March. But baseball coaches it seems like they just get along the best. Picking different things. One of the things I wrote down in my little notes was, early in your career as a young coach, and I think we've probably all done this, is you take your losses personally. You take your wins personally too, but you take your losses like, oh, it's my fault. And, nobody wants to talk to me. I don't want to go out and have a burger or drink after a game because a parent might be in there. And that's, you got to get off that taking losses personally. We all know that, players win games, coaches win games too, but, it's amazing how good coaches are when they have good players. So the one main thing to younger coaches is don't take stuff personally. Especially if you get, because I know this. I forgot what Joe said our turnover was this year with coaching, and there's a variety of reasons. Like I retired, but we had 3 other coaches in the FEA. Or we have 4 new coaches in the FEA out of 10 teams, which is like never happened that many before. But there's a lot of other factors. But again, when the 2 or 3 parents complain, remember there's 15 or 18 or at least on your varsity team that the silent majority are supportive, and you don't let the 2 or 3 ones ruin your coaching, and get you out of coaching, because there's too many, especially younger ones, that officials, umpires, same type of thing. I mean, when you look at the number of older umpires and officials there are in sports, they're getting older, and we need to get younger people in. But younger people are, sometimes I don't blame when you're at a 5th grade t-ball game or whatever it is, or basketball game, and you're getting yelled at, and for $20 or whatever they pay you, that's tough. But stick with it. You're out for the kids. The majority of you're going to get a couple people complain. And one of the things I've always said, and I've said this at parent meetings, we have parent meetings, which I'm sure every school does. In the beginning of the year, start of the year, talk about your philosophy and all that type of thing. And I always say, for my many, many years of coaching, the players know why they're not playing, why somebody's playing ahead of them. Because they're there every day at practice. They see it. Parents don't always see that. I always tell the parents, I said, ask your son why he's not playing. right? And usually the kids are at least, with the coach, I tell the kid, hey, if you got a question, why I'm not playing, come ask the coach, come ask me. I'll tell you. You're just not as good as the other kid. We'll try to get you in there. And there's many examples. I'm sure all of us coaches have that, where you gave a kid a chance. They got 2 hits. They made a nice play. And, hey, you know what? The next game, they're there again. They're in the game again, type thing. So, it's tough, with baseball especially, because, 300 hitter, we all heard, you're out 7 times, so, be honest, be fair, try not to, when I was younger, I'll admit now, I probably humiliated kids when I shouldn't have in front of teams. And I know now you just don't do that. Pull them aside, talk to them quietly, don't do it in front of the team. And we all had our motivations to why we might yell at a kid in front of the team, maybe to motivate other kids on the team type thing, or teach the whole team a lesson. But I know times have changed. With all the stuff kids are seeing now on the internet, and kids are seeing with academies and travel ball and all that type of thing. And sometimes how they're told how great they are in travel ball. And we've all, as veteran coaches, I've heard this for many years, that, they're great in travel ball when they have 10, 11 kids on the team, and mommy and daddy are paying a lot of money, is a little different than being on the high school team, so nothing wrong with that type of thing. But I can, the last probably 10, 15 years, I can see where, kids are told by several different, or they have their own personal hitting coach, their own personal pitching coach. And some even have those during your high school season, which if it's okay with the head coach, that's fine. But, those are things that head coach, because all of a sudden you get one coach telling you one thing, one coach telling you another thing, and then they get confused. So that's always a tough part too.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of walked into that. One of the things I want to ask you is, like, again, the fire burns so long. You're a guy known for your energy and your mentorship, and you've just been around doing it for so long at such a high level. Like, but the game has changed, the kids have changed, the environment out in the game has changed a little bit. How it's how it's taught, how it's played a little bit. I mean, there's obviously still the fundamentals that are the same, but you talked about academies, you talked about maybe parent involvement. Are there anything else you can think of that? The landscape of high school baseball has changed, in your tenure.
Oh, sure. Well, the positive things, the facilities are, are much better. When I started coaching in 1981, and we were playing on a gravel infield, basically at Oshkosh West, and in other schools in the conference, snow fences and all that stuff. And now, obviously, many years later, in technology and maintenance and everything else, but facilities, haven't. I mean, in their FVA and the Fox Valley Association, we have some outstanding places to play, which is great. Our kids are a little spoiled because they do get to play on good. We played some non-conference games on some not too good facilities, but we're a Division I league, and so you expect if you're in a Division I high school, you should have Division I facilities. And one of the many things I learned from coaches before me, and probably most from Tom Lechner. When he was at UWO and we were doing the Oshkosh Giants in summer together and stuff, is how, we didn't need the city to do the field. We didn't need the, I'm sure a lot of schools do this, but our kids learn to do field maintenance their freshman year, and by the time they get to varsity, I actually give them assignments and take 5-10 minutes after a game and after practice. They all have an assignment to do. So it's not like, hey, somebody go grab a rake and do third base. They all have a job to do. Pitchers that go in with our pitching coach and maybe do some icing or some riding a bike. We always have backups to take whatever their job is, usually something with the mound. But one of the one of the positives that facilities got better. Some of the other things, I think, I don't know. For many years we've always had the problem with specializing. And every school, I'm sure, has baseball coaches have lost some what could be pretty good baseball players that specialized in primarily probably football and basketball, because that's the big three. Obviously we have our AD back many years ago at Oshkosh West. We have plaques on the wall right when you come in by our gymnasium of 4-year 3-sport athletes, and their name is on there. And every year there's maybe 3 or 4 kids that were 4 years in 3 sports, which you'd hope there'd be more, because typically those kids are going to be good athletes, and even if they're maybe a really good basketball player, they could still be a pretty good baseball player. Problem is summer, Summer is one of the problems and every coach has this, and probably every sport, how to do the summer. Where do you spend your time? Is it at football? Is it at camps? Is it at passing leagues? Is it at contact days? And then you got baseball. Do you do academy? Do you do Legion? Do you do this? Do you play with your high school teammates in summer? Do you travel around in summer? That type of thing. And in basketball again, and I've been fortunate at my high school, at West High School, that we've had pretty good relationships with the football and basketball coaches, and we try to not step on each other's toes and that type of thing. But it's tough with scheduling games, scheduling fields, and all of a sudden, Tuesday night's a varsity basketball league, Thursday's a passing league, and this type of thing. And I've been fortunate that we've had pretty good cooperation, but I've heard stories from other schools that that's not always the case. So as a head baseball, it's one thing to try to work things out with your other coaches. And like in the city of Oshkosh, in summer we have a Legion program, but it's all Oshkosh North, Oshkosh West, Oshkosh Lourdes, 3 high schools, that kind of combine. And of course, those other schools have their summer contact days and have their summer basketball leagues and that type of thing. So I wish we'd get more kids to play, baseball, even if that's not their number one sport, because good athletes are going to be hopefully good teammates and help the whole team out.
Oh, that's outstanding. When you talked about just summer in Oshkosh, and man, you talked about it earlier. I just got to hear about the All-Star game more. Obviously, you talked to us about, when the stadium got tore down and Fox City was being built in the mid '90s. You guys took it on in Oshkosh North. It's been there ever since. A phenomenal event. I mean, to me, obviously, I'm involved in the association, not as much as you are, but people who listen, like, there's 2 things you got to get to every year. One is the clinic, in February. And number 2 is All-Star Weekend, starting with the golf outing on Thursday, which is a heck of a time. And then the games on Friday and Saturday. So, what's the state of it? Why do you enjoy doing it so much? Because it's a phenomenal event.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we, luckily, in fall, when I knew I was going to be retiring from head baseball coach, I asked the executive board and thing. They said, "Hey, am I still eligible to do the All-Star?" And they said, "Well, yeah, you don't have to be an active coach. You got to be an active coach to be like I said, officer and a district rep, conference rep, that type of thing." But so I said, "Yeah, I still want to be involved, doing the All-Star game. It's great help. I mean, I organize all the stuff, but we have such a great, build-in from our association. We have district reps come and help. The concession stand is something that runs through our Snitz Club, which is, like I said, a group of guys in Oshkosh that just are good for baseball. So we don't have to worry about that. But the All-Star game, I get some district reps will come and do the tickets, shake balls, run the apparel tent, sell the programs, help with ice, in the dugouts. A variety of things, and I've been fortunate. We have a good group of guys that come consistently every year to help out at there, and the association will help. We take them out for dinner on Friday night to a nice restaurant in Oshkosh and so on, and their room is is picked up, and for them coming in and helping. Sometimes they can only come on the Saturday, because maybe their family has something, or they only come on Friday night because their younger son or daughters in some tournament Saturday, but. We have the consistency of, like I said, of our group. We got Marty Paulson, we got Ron Kading, we got Joe Wade up in the press box. Joe's doing everything kind of on the computer. Marty does the scorebook. Ron Kading does the scoreboard. My longtime assistant for Scott, 34 years. My longtime assistant Scott Morrison was my pitching coach since probably 1991. I think he's an Oshkosh West grad from the mid '80s, and Scott does our public address and plays the music, in between. And they're there for almost every game of the Classic, which is not easier for me trying to organize, so I don't have to keep getting different people up there. Mark's always there. Several of all the officers are almost always there, at least when the best that they can make it. So we have a good relationship with EJ Schneider with the Snitz Club that we always get that weekend. They don't schedule Legion games or nothing that weekend. I just had a Snitz Club meeting actually last Wednesday, and we also, the Thursday before the All-Star games, we always try not to have a Legion or a Youth League game on the field because they want to get it, don't want to get it tore up in case it rains and that type of thing. So I'm fortunate right now to have a really good groundskeeper in Oshkosh for our school system, because the field is belongs to the school system. So we have an outstanding groundskeeper that cares about baseball. We've had plenty in the past that basically put the lines down. That's all they did, if they were even straight. But the guy we have now used to work for the T-Rats. He was an intern for the T-Rats several years ago, and he loves baseball and so on. He does a great job. And then we get some coaches or 4 or 5 of Snitz Club guys in between games, help out in the field type thing. So, I work with UW Oshkosh. We stay at the dorms at UW Oshkosh, which I'm sure some players are used to staying at hotels during travel ball and all that type of stuff. But we stay at the dorm. It works out good. We have 72 players, and we've had very few in my 30-some years. We've had very few issues, with players and that type of thing. We've had some that didn't. That we've had very few. We had one last year that didn't show up, but that's very, very, very seldom. Our WBCA coaches do a good job of nominating our chairs, which is Mark Fuller has the West team, Ron Kading has the South team, Chad Montez has the East team, which is the Milwaukee kind of area, and Eric Beard from Wrightstown has the North team. And they've been doing it Ron and Mark have been doing it forever. Chad's been doing it for probably a good, at least 15, 20 years. I think he took over. I think Timmy O'Driscoll from Arrowhead did it before that. And Eric Beard been doing it for several years from Wrightstown. So they do a great job of getting, guys that deserve to play, getting names, getting a team selected. Like I said, we stay in the dorm on Friday at UW Oshkosh. We bus them over to the ballpark. We get pictures, which are awesome. We have a company called Network Photo that does our pictures, and they'll do a plaque, and 3 hours later, they'll bring the plaques and drop them off with me at the ballpark at 7:30 at night. And we hand them out to the players right away. It's a plaque with the team picture on it, all the players' names on it, the year, all that kind of stuff, which is probably a $35, $40 plaque. And that's one of the things that each player gets, which is kind of neat. They each get a T-shirt. This year we have Zephyr Hats is actually going to help sponsor the T-shirts type thing. So they each get a T-shirt. We have lots of other apparel then that Mark Fuller actually gets and designs and that type of thing that we sell to the players, and we sell to parents and family and that type of stuff at the games. So, the attendance at the games, we have 2 games on Friday night, starting at 4:00 on June 27th. And we have 2 games, and games usually go pretty quick, because pretty good pitching. We ask the pitchers not to throw, keep 3 days in between throwing it for their summer team or Legion team or whatever they do. So most of them are pretty good with that. There's always occasionally some guys with sore arms, and that's understandable. So we play 2 games on Friday, and then we play 4 games starting at 10 a.m. on Saturday. We're usually done out of there unless we have rain issues or something. We're usually out of there by 7 at night. We give an MVP award named after Tom Nygaard. It's the Tom Nygaard Most Valuable Player Award. And Tom was one of the originators, along with Mark Fuller and Tom Konowalski, and I forgot who the 4th guy was, back in '84, I think it was, that they started this All-Star game. So it's a really good weekend. We start golfing on Thursday. Usually it's 11 a.m. from Winnegamie Golf Course, which is right outside of Appleton. We've been going there for 40 years probably. They give us a good deal, and $60 for 18 holes, a cart, couple drink tickets, food at the turn, burgers, brats, that chicken sandwich, that type of thing. For $60, that's pretty good. You can't, beat that anywhere. It's a nice golf course. It's not a country club or nothing like that, but it's a nice golf course. They work with us pretty well. This year, normally we have 11 a.m. shotgun, but this year, because they have a morning league, the guy asked if we could move it back to like 11:30, and we said that's fine with us. We just need to be done. Usually we're done by 4:00. And then the coaches go to Oshkosh, and we check into the hotel on the river in Oshkosh, a nice hotel, the Marriott down there. And then we have a coaches meeting on Thursday night. And then the coaches meet with the chairs of each group, like with Mark Fuller, with Chad Montez, whoever. And they go over their rosters, because a lot of times the coaches don't know too many of these players. And they go over the rosters, and then we sit down, we buy them dinner, we buy them some beverages. And we're in downtown Oshkosh, so it's kind of neat that usually I have a connection at the Chamber of Commerce, so I usually try to get 15 to 20 passes, at least try to get VIPs if possible, what they call Waterfest, which is a Thursday night event in downtown Oshkosh. We have a big amphitheater that seats, 5,000-6,000 people. And there's usually older type bands that are there. So it's not a bunch of young kids running around. But usually, last year I think we had about 15 guys that gave them, they wanted them, coaches that say, it's about a 5-minute walk from our hotel. So that's a cool experience, I hope, for the coaches. We try to make it a good experience for the coaches that are coaching in the All-Star game. The players, like I said, they stay at a dorm. They room with another player from their team. They basically get in there at 8-9 o'clock at night on Friday and get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I take them down. We have dinner at what's called Fox River Brewing Company. And it used to be called Fratello's. It's on the river in Oshkosh, one of our nicest restaurants in Oshkosh, and they have a little buffet set up for our players. And then in the morning, we go back to that restaurant, have some breakfast, and then we take them to the ballpark, and then we're at the ballpark all day. The players and coaches, after their first game in the day, they get a little coupon card that's worth $6 in our concession stand, so they can at least go get lunch in the concession stand and so on. And this year, a big thing we talked about last week at the Snitz Club. So anybody that's been to the All-Star game in the past, now I'm one of the younger guys on the Snitz Club board, so you can figure out, that the ages we're getting up there. But they're going to add a credit card machine. So I haven't worked a concession stand there for a while, but they said, especially during the All-Star game, a lot of high school kids, which I totally understand, come up with credit cards. They don't have cash. And we never could take. So now this summer we can take credit cards. So if it's working, hopefully it's working. So we try to give a good experience for the players. When they're done with their game on Saturday, they'll play, like I said, 1 game on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. We have the East plays the North in the last game, which typically starts about 4:30, 5 o'clock, because they are the 2 closest. The West kids, from the West area of the state have the longest drive. So they're out of the stadium by 3 o'clock typically. Our field is awesome with taking rain. Last year we were poured on all day Friday from probably noon till 2:30 or something like that. We were poured on in Oshkosh. So I'm scrambling around. I've done this gig for a long time, and guys like Mark and Marty and Ronnie and Joe and those guys have been around a long time. Like, we've only had one day in the last probably 35 years where the Classic was rained out, and that was early 2000s, where it just poured all day Saturday, and we don't reschedule or nothing like that. So, but we were poured on last year, and so I'm scrambling out. There's a big bubble next to our dorm in Oshkosh that UWO has for indoor football, rec department, whatever. So I was scrambling around to say, well, we can't have these guys sitting in a dorm for 3 hours. So we were going to go there. There's a restaurant in Oshkosh that has games, the Mine Shaft. And I went over there and I said, hey, can I bring 70-some kids play? These are 18-year-olds. Can I bring them in to play games? We'll give them a voucher or whatever. And that was a little stressful. But the sun came out. I think the game was maybe delayed half an hour. Our field, like I said, drains awesome. Our groundskeepers did a great job. We shortened the games up, if I remember right, to like 6 innings on Friday because we didn't want to go late into the night type thing. So, but other than that, everything runs pretty good. We've had one year with like tornado warnings, so luckily we can get in the Oshkosh North Field House, which is right next to this, not right next to, maybe a quarter mile from the field. So we've had things set up in the past. That we don't move the games, and we tell the players right away. I said that we're playing Friday, playing 2 games Friday, 4 Saturday. We're not moving into Sunday because they have their senior graduation parties. They got their Legion stuff. They got whatever. But it seemed to work out good, and I think most of players all have pretty good experiences. We split the time with the players. The coaches we ask them, each kid at least starts 1 game, but try to split them up 4 innings here, 3 innings there, vice versa. The coaches have all been very good about that. So. It seems to work out pretty good. So we don't want to change it. We've had some discussion about, changing locations and stuff like that, but, that's tough. Like, I could do that, but you need to have a local person, to know the hotels, know the restaurants and things like that can handle you. So it seems to work out pretty well.
I don't know. I'll tell you what, as much as it's changed, now you guys got credit card machines and all the things that are happening. The baseball itself is phenomenal. I mean, if you want to just go up there and watch, you don't know, you could care less where the kid's from. Obviously, you might have a rooting interest. You may have heard of a kid's name, but just to watch those kids go about their business, and it's competitive, but it's not, it's not a conference rival. It's not a postseason. Like, the state tournament ends a couple weeks prior to that. That's obviously an incredible moment for anyone who gets to step foot in Appleton and maybe hoist a gold ball or a silver ball. And a couple weeks later, you have kids coming from maybe the same conference, the same area, coming together. I don't know. I tell you what, Tony, when they're staying in the dorms, it's like something special happens there. It really does. And I was fortunate enough to be up there in 2021, as one of the coaches. And I'll go back every year, obviously, as a district rep, and I'll do water, I'll do tickets. But just to be around those men, because that's what they're 18 years old. They're just, a month or so from going to college, a lot of them, whatever life takes them next. It's so fun to watch them for a weekend just gel in the bond. But man, the baseball itself is just incredible, just incredible. So thank you for all that, to your team, to everyone who's involved, because it's one of the best events that in the state of Wisconsin, year after year.
I know one of the things that I really enjoy, and I think a lot of the other guys do too, is when we get the players they're in uniform. Like I said, we take pictures out in center field. Then we get all the players and coaches together in center field, and I introduce myself and say a little bit about, don't make sure you turn your key into the dorm key and all that, because I got to chase kids down with that. I do the basic, whatever you call that, basic stuff, and then I turn over to Mark Fuller, and Mark just he does a history type thing, and you can see these kids kind of not their jaws drop, because most of these kids have all been around, played a lot of baseball, and been on really good high school teams, but also traveled around, and not all of them, but many of them are playing college ball. But when Mark goes into the history of guys, lately Dalton Marshall, I looked in my files a couple years ago, and I'm like, when Dalton made it to the big leagues, I knew his dad Gary a little bit from college, and I'm looking, and I find his acceptance form that the players have to fill out, and then they give it to Joe Waite, and then Joe usually puts it in a folder for me. I've never really had to go back and go into them, but I'm like, so I started looking through it. I said, here's Dalton Volsher, big leaguer, that played in our All-Star game. You got, all other, guys that got up to pro ball, got up to big league ball, that played, and it's just pretty cool how that works. We have a new thing this year, and it's for 1 year. This is our 41st All-Star game, I think it is. No, yeah, I think so. And we talked about for the last 2 years of, hey, let's try to get some retired WBCA Hall of Fame coaches, if possible, that are retired to come back and coach in the game. And we thought about it for about a year or two, and we decided last fall, well, let's do it this year. So actually today I'm on text message train with Mark Fuller and Ron Kading and Eric Beard and Chad Montez, and I think Marty Paulson's on there. I think Tommy Wilson's on there, about who they have as a retired coach. It's pretty neat. Mark's already got 3 guys, retired guys from the West Side. Ronnie's still looking for the guys that he wanted to get our dead, he said, but so that won't work. Eric's working on a couple guys in the North. I think Chad has his 3 guys from the East team. I think Jack Freeze, if I remember right. Pat Hansen, I think, from the East area, and who was the third one? I can't remember. And then we're going to have 3 retired coaches, and then we're going to have an active coach. So, because in our discussions, obviously Eric Beard would love to get Marty Paulson to coach, and Marty loves doing the scorebook, and he said, no, I'm good, I'll stay and do the scorebook. But we said, well, the retired coaches probably aren't going to want to sleep in a dorm bed, which we don't blame them. So we're going to work it out that the retired coaches can stay in a hotel with our executive board, basically. And then the one active coach gets to stay in the dorm. He gets his own room type thing, but be in the dorm. But we've had very few issues with players. We ask them to be in their beds by 11 o'clock. I'm sure that doesn't always happen, but UWO does a great job working with us with that. But that'll be kind of neat with retired guys coming out there. And we're assuming they're going to be in uniform. We're not going to make them be in uniform, obviously, but they get to be around and that type of thing. So that'll be and it's just this year. It's not going to be every year like that.
That's really cool. And my last thing about the Classic, I think one of the things that stands out to me the most about it's the last time those guys wore their high school jersey. Obviously you lose in the postseason. Only 4 teams go home with a state championship. Every time you got to rip that jersey off as a senior, it's one of the hardest things those guys have to do is wear it for the last time. But if you're going to the All-Star Classic, you get to wear it one more time, and you officially know this is the day. Take your last pictures, let the dust settle from the season. Compete, have some fun, and just kind of be a baseball dude. And it's just such a cool thing. Well, Tony, I
And it
just
is
peeped
one
up.
quick thing on that, Tim.
Yeah.
I said another one of the things at the All-Star game is like after their last game and having parents coming out and taking pictures on the field. And I still got pictures of some of my guys that played, with like a FVA picture, the FVA players type thing. One year, I think we had 9 of our 18 players on the North team because we had really good seniors that year. We're FVA, and you get other guys that maybe competed against each other, for years, and summer ball and in spring ball and that, and parents, I think too, you see tears, and like you said, you see some tears shed because this is most likely, if not, this is their last time, in their high school uniform, and they wear their high school hat. We used to have a sponsorship with Puka, and they would always give us hats, and we have like a North hat, East hat, West hat, South hat, which was fine, but we don't have our affiliation with Puka anymore. Like I said, now it's Zephyr, and Zephyr's going to do T-shirt type thing for the players. Um, but yeah, they can wear. Some teams come with a couple different jerseys. That's entirely up to them, type thing. But they have all their own gear and so on. So that's always a neat experience.
Absolutely. Well, hey, just to start to wrap this up a little bit, again, I got you for an hour now. Is just you were a guy. Obviously, you mentioned you retired last fall. Big transition for you. You transitioned out of the classroom a few years ago, and now handing the keys over to West Baseball. But man, first you still have that fire burning. So like, how did you keep that fire lit for so long? What are you looking forward to next? And yeah, just leave us with some good nuggets.
Sure. Several people asked, well, why you keep coaching? And now some districts is different. Like in Oshkosh, you can be a retired teacher and still be a head coach. Some school districts, I know that once you retire as a teacher, you can be an assistant coach, but you can't be a head coach. Oshkosh still allows us to do that. So, but after, for the younger guys and stuff, it's once you're out of the building. I subbed my first year out. I substitute taught maybe 6 to 8 times, and when you get that attitude from kids like, I don't have to do this. No, all of us teachers know what I'm talking about when you go and sub in somebody else's class. And I'm like, okay, I know I paid my dues. I subbed 4 years before I got my full-time job, and I knew I had to do that to try to get a job. But afterward, when you're not in the building all the time, it's tough. It's not having relationships with the kids and seeing them in the hall. I'm one of those guys that I was in the hallway between classes every day, and and all that type of thing. And I was at every open gym. I don't think I ever missed an open gym, and probably 40 years. So it was nice to have Sunday nights this year. Starting in January was when we started open gyms at West. That, oh man, I can sit and watch the end of the NFL game. I can watch the end of the playoff because you always have to. We had an open gym at 7, so you always have to leave at 6:30 to get everything set up and all that type of stuff. So, but the relationship with the kid, I'm going to miss that. I'll be out at games and so on, and I still go to the high school and get workouts, and they're allowed me to come in and get workouts in the morning. So I still see some of the kids, but not very many. But that's tough with the relationships with. Especially like this year's seniors, we had a pretty good group of juniors last year, and this year's seniors. So hopefully, get to see them being successful, and that would be tough to not. But probably sit up in the press box. But now I told our new head coach, which is Chris Atwood, and he was a volunteer assistant with us 4 years ago. He was actually student teaching at West High School in Fayette, and I knew his name. He was a pitcher for UW Oshkosh, really good pitcher actually, and. If I asked him if he wanted to volunteer coach, and he said sure. So I volunteered his first year, and then my freshman coach left for a different school district, I think at the time. So he took over our freshman team for 3 years. So he has good experience in the building. But I told him, hey, now I can be the one up there in the stands, second guessing everything that you do, and so on. So as a joke, I would not do that. But you always get the second guessers, and and we all know, all those coaches know, you have those stories of, my wife has many of them, my father-in-law has many of them, of sitting in the stands and parents not knowing who they are, and start saying certain stuff. And I'm sure my wife and father-in-law had to bite their tongue many times, or bite their lip, not to say something. So, but it was very few times that stuff would happen. But that's still, that's part of our gig, So, but telling coaches, stick with it. Again, go to clinics. Like our state clinic is awesome. The notes that we get and so on is great. Get involved with the ABCA. If you don't attend the clinics, the national convention, still get involved, because you get. I don't know how many times, Tim, it comes during the week where you get the little videos and stuff like that. which are I still look at all those and different things that different coaches are doing and that type of thing. So a couple other quick tidbits. Get along with your administration. I've been fortunate for as long as I have. I've had probably 7 or 8 principals, probably 5 or 6 superintendents. I've only had 2 athletic directors. My athletic director now has been there since the early 2000s. And we had a guy, when I was hired, it was a guy that had been there for about 20, 25 years. So I was fortunate to have consistency with athletic directors and so on. But get along with your administration is a key thing. Get along with other teachers. I've hopefully had a good relationship with the other teachers, because I'd be in there bugging them about a kid's grade, and what does this kid need to do to get better. And I pride myself. Our teams haven't been all that successful the last couple of years, but we had some really good years in the 2 state tournaments and a couple conference tournaments and so on. But we've been the academic all academic team for the ABCA, the national group. You have to have a 3-point higher team GPA varsity team. So we've had 7 years in a row that we've reached that. So part of that was when I'm in the building, I can be bugging kids about, hey, get this stuff in. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And when I retired from teaching, that was one of the harder things to do too. So, but getting along with that, custodians, you guys all know, groundskeepers. Like I said, we have a great one now in Oshkosh, but before that, we had some not. There were some years where I told the guy, don't touch anything. I'll run out there during my open hour and bail some water if we need to, or whatever the case may be, or take the tarp off, because that's fortunate if you have a good groundskeeper, because basically we do the field. Our players and the coaches do the field, and we like it doing it that way. It's one thing I'll probably miss. I still ask the AD if I can go out there and cut the grass, because for the last 30 years I've cut the infield grass myself, because I didn't want the school district's big lawnmower out tearing up our field. The school district would do the outfield, but I always do the infield. We have a guy at E.J. Schneider Field at North. Actually, he's the president of our Snitz Club, a retired teacher from many years ago. Jim White, his name is. And he goes out there yet on the lawnmower and cuts we don't want the school district's lawnmower out on E.J. Schneider Field. And, it's things like that I'll probably miss. But still be out watching games. I get some of the FEA coaches told me at the clinic, they want to see me down the fence. And I said, okay, I'll be yelling at you. But, in fun, of course. So I'm hoping to meet up with Marty Paulson and get to a Fond du Lac Oshkosh West game down in Fond du Lac and meet up and maybe at one of his favorite watering holes and talk about stuff. So those are all good things I'm looking forward to.
And there it is. Huge thank you goes out to Tony for taking time to sit down with us. Love this episode. Talk about some of the good old boys of the association in such a positive manner. Tony's one of those guys. I feel like he's everywhere. I've seen him at Wrigley, seen him at the clinic. I saw him in spring training a couple years ago. He's just a baseball lifer and a baseball junkie. And again, the All-Star Classic is an incredible way to just put a bow on the 2025 season. This is the 41st annual, again, held at Oshkosh North High School, E.J. Schneider Field. Head on up there, watch some of the best talent in the state of Wisconsin to come through. It's an incredible event. As you know, this Game 7 here comes to a wrap with the podcast. Just want to say congratulations to everyone on the seasons that they had, however they finished. At the collegiate level, UW-Whitewater won a national championship this year. Some other collegiate programs in the state were at the World Series, on the doorstep of it, made the regionals, and just however their seasons ended, just an incredible experience for baseball across the state of Wisconsin. At the high school level, congratulations to Muskego, New Berlin-Eisenhower, Kenosha St. Joe's, and Johnson's Creek for their state championships up at Appleton. Another incredible year. We worked through some weather delays, but the staff did an incredible job once again making it happen, and we had 2 walk-off victories at Division I and Division II to cap off the 2025 state tournament series. So once again, thank you for tuning in to these episodes. Hopefully you get as much value as I do from them, and have a great rest of your day.